in the last few days discussing various facets of Srila Prabhupada's appeal to his followers. Naturally, I've been quoting various of those followers, some of whom later on disappointed many devotees by not living up to the reputation that they had for being closely associated with Srila Prabhupada and leaders of the Krishna consciousness movement. But nevertheless, the fact that they were with Srila Prabhupada and were instrumental in his spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement throughout the world, they were personally known to Srila Prabhupada. I wasn't, among probably most of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Did Prabhupada personally know you? No. Of course, in one sense, yes, but not in the conventional way. So, they're very special jivas, no doubt, those who had the opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada in that very intimate manner, so we can always remember that. Another point in relationship to Srila Prabhupada, which is not in my notes which I made here, but I quite often make because I think it's important to make, is the invention of the all-merciful Srila Prabhupada. Causeless mercy is there, no doubt. But all-merciful, the idea that, well, you can do whatever you like and Prabhupada, he's there, he'll look after us. Well, that wasn't Srila Prabhupada's teachings. The idea that you just somehow or other say Jai Prabhupada sometimes and do Krishna consciousness at the level that you like, as you like, when you like, how you like, if you like, that is not the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. The mercy of the Guru is that he gives instructions by which one can become purified. We have to do our work also. So Srila Prabhupada is very merciful, no doubt, but that doesn't mean that he is obliged to give us Krishna prem, even if we are not very serious about practicing Krishna consciousness, or we invent some philosophy that we don't have to practice it very carefully and seriously because Prabhupada will do all the work. It's what Srila Prabhupada criticized Christians for, that we can sin and Jesus will save us. That's not what Jesus taught. It's not what Srila Prabhupada taught, and not what the Shastra teaches. We have to do our work also. Anyway, getting back to the various facets of Srila Prabhupada's fascinating and glorious and worshipable personality. Mind reading. Again, it's not anything that Srila Prabhupada, he stressed that we should practice Krishna consciousness and we develop all different kinds of powers. The devotee's only intention is to serve Krishna in the manner that Krishna wants to be served. But it happens that people who become spiritually advanced, they may, if Krishna so wants, have bestowed upon them the faculty of reading others' minds. And it's not truly spiritual accomplishment. Many people who are not even devotees, they may be yogis if the senses are controlled. then one may develop that faculty. But that doesn't mean one's on the spiritual. Simply to control the senses, that is a prerequisite for actual spiritual life. But it doesn't in and of itself constitute spiritual life any more than giving up all one's wealth might be a good start, might be, if one is interested in pursuing spiritual life very seriously, but giving up one's wealth in and of itself is not a spiritual activity. For that matter, brushing one's teeth is a good start to the day in Krishna's service. And if one is fully engaged in Krishna's service, then brushing the teeth can also be considered part of devotional service. It's mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas, Chaitanya Charitamrita, a devotee should do this, but it's not that just by brushing your teeth you become spiritually advanced. But one should do if one is serving Krishna. It's part of the dinacharya, the daily duties to be performed. Anyway, this point of mind reading, there are many instances. Many devotees reported that when Srila Prabhupada might look at them just for a second, look directly at them, and they felt naked. That means not physically naked, but that they were exposed, that they themselves became aware of all the dirty things in their heart, and they became aware that Prabhupada was aware of that also. Here's an amusing anecdote concerning Mahabuddhi Prabhu, disciple of Srila Prabhupada. This was when he was just newly coming to the temple in Los Angeles. His name was Randy. By his own admission, he was cocky or somewhat puffed up character. I didn't meet him. I saw him a few times, but I always found him to be a very affable person, if not with a somewhat strong temper. Anyway, he recalls the first time that he met Srila Prabhupada. He had long blonde hair. He was from a rich family. He was at university doing well. He was a football player, which in America means American football. It's more like rugby, and I think it's more physical even than rugby. They play it with helmets on. It's so very strong body. So he was a student leader. So in various ways he was quite a prominent person as within this vast ocean of insignificance called the material world. But he was attracted to Krishna consciousness. He had been joining kirtans in the Los Angeles temple. And Srila Prabhupada's secretary somehow or other invited him to come upstairs to Srila Prabhupada's room. And he found Randy with his long blonde hair, found that he was there with Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada's quarters in Los Angeles, his room is not very big actually. It's maybe his sitting room is about 1/3 the size of this room. And there were various big leaders of the Krishna conscious movement there, and Randy himself. So Srila Prabhupada, he looked straight at Randy and said, "Why be a Kripana?" And Randy thought, what's a Kripana? What does that mean? And Prabhupada said, Kripana means miser. And Randy thought about his family's wealth and how they planned to use it for Randy and themselves. And Prabhupada continued speaking about the mentality of a Kripana. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, he often used that. You'll find that in one of his early purports in Bhagavad Gita. He discusses this term Kripana. He usually uses it to mean someone who has the human form of life but does not utilize it for spiritual advancement. That's actually quoting from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the conversation between Yajnavalkya and Gargi, I believe. So one should use one's human form of life for self-realization. And Randy, who didn't take instruction from anyone very easily, he felt that Srila Prabhupada was directly smashing him by saying all these things. It was like an ongoing conversation between Randy's rebellious way of thinking and Srila Prabhupada just smashing. Although Prabhupada was speaking generally to everyone. Then looking at Randy, that was his observation, although possibly Srila Prabhupada was looking around the room, but he felt that Prabhupada was looking at him and Srila Prabhupada said, because you have been given some ability, some wealth and some opulence by Krishna, you should use it in Krishna's service. If you use it only for your own sense gratification, that is simply miserly. If you do not take to Krishna consciousness, you will ruin your human form of life. And then Srila Prabhupada went on to explain about devotional service and how it is practiced, and Randy again internally puffed himself up, thinking that Prabhupada was insulting him by calling him a miser. He just came to visit him and then he starts insulting him. Randy could not but admit to himself that Srila Prabhupada seemed to be reading his mind, but he thought, well, if he's really reading my mind, if he's really perfect, he should know the future also. So he's trying to avoid that Prabhupada is speaking to him. At that point, Srila Prabhupada asked for the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Sanskrit edition, to be brought. And then Srila Prabhupada began reading from the 12th canto, the predictions for the age of Kali. How humankind will become degraded. And Srila Prabhupada went through this, that there are different points. One of them is Lavanyam Keshadharanam. People will think simply to have hair is beauty. And Prabhupada said that men will consider that to have long hair means they are beautiful. Then when Randy heard that, he became really perturbed and started to shake. And he thought, he's completely defeated me. So he left and he was driving his big car and feeling rather angry. Why am I treated like this? But then overnight he thought, actually, Prabhupada was right. I'm simply a fool. And he came back the next day with a check for $1,000, which was a considerable donation at that time. And $1,000 is worth a lot more, and people weren't giving. So, the devotees felt that in the presence of Prabhupada, there's no hiding. Among others, we can maybe hide our intentions, hide our ego, but in the presence of Srila Prabhupada, it's just not possible. Tamal Krishna Goswami, he wrote, the spiritual master knows thoroughly the heart of his disciple, and this was in relation to Srila Prabhupada. The spiritual master knows thoroughly the heart of his disciple and always endeavors to help the disciple cleanse his heart and make it a fit place for Krishna to reside. Of course, Srila Prabhupada denied that he was omniscient. When a devotee asked him how could he know what's going on in his Krishna conscious movement all over the world, Srila Prabhupada said, well, therefore I have the GBC secretaries and the town presidents, and I asked them. When he was asked, that was in a letter he wrote that, when he was personally asked about, is the spiritual master omniscient, does he know everything? Srila Prabhupada says he knows what Krishna informs him, what Krishna thinks he has to know. Paramatma samahita. Such a person is described in the Bhagavad Gita, one who has controlled his senses, as one who is in contact with Paramatma. One incident, one devotee, he was from Calcutta, but he was studying in England and he became a full-time brahmachari in England, which was unusual at the time. Nowadays, mostly the devotees who join as brahmacharis in England are from Indian backgrounds, directly or indirectly. It means mostly born of Indian ancestry in England. But at that time, as I remember, brahmacharis, there was Shubhag, Brajendra Kumar, who became Brajendra Nandan Swami, and there was another called Brajendra something else, Brajendra Nandan. He was studying to be a doctor. I don't know what happened to him. So there was 3 Indian brahmacharis I can think of in London when I joined, and the rest were mostly English, few Irish, 1 Turkish, 1 German, but mostly English. So anyway, one of them was born in Calcutta, and Srila Prabhupada used to speak to him in Bengali. And as I heard it, one of the devotees asked, Srila Prabhupada asked him that, which, when he first met him, is a normal thing among Indian people. Srila Prabhupada was not exactly Indian, but he did, to a large extent, follow the same culture that everyone else does in India. So he asked him, where are you from? Calcutta. Which part of Calcutta? So this devotee, he shifted his location a few streets to a more prestigious one than he was actually from. The next morning in class, in the course of his talking, Srila Prabhupada looked at him directly and said, one should never lie to one's spiritual master. Here's a quotation from Satsvarup Das Goswami about Srila Prabhupada. Everything seemed to become exposed under his eyes and his gaze. Prabhupada's glance functioned both as the thunderbolt and the rose. If a devotee went before Srila Prabhupada and he was not entirely honest or open, or if he was trying to bluff his commitment to Krishna, Srila Prabhupada could penetrate through all this by a straight gaze into the devotee's eyes. It's difficult to be insincere in Prabhupada's presence. Purijan Prabhu tells one of the times when Srila Prabhupada severely chastised him, and he said, he gave 2 analogies to describe how this particular form of mercy felt. One was open heart surgery without anesthesia. I don't know if that's even possible, because if the patient moves, then it becomes very dangerous. But anyway, you get the idea. And also from the Bible, there's described that Adam attempted to hide from God after he had committed the original sin for which we're all suffering, that eating the apple or whatever it was, and as a result the whole of humanity has to suffer. It's very poor theology. Anyway, Adam's attempt to hide from God after he had sinned. I remember feeling I had no shelter and nowhere to hide. But actually the shelter is Srila Prabhupada. There's an example given in Shastra that just as the child, if punished by the mother, has nowhere to go but to the mother, there's no other shelter but the mother. So similarly, the devotee prays. I believe that's recorded in Padyavali, and it may be in other Sri Vaishnava and other traditions also. It's quite a common analogy that even if we feel we're being punished by Krishna for our wrongdoing, still we have no other recourse but to go to him. We have no other shelter. And here's a quote from Srila Prabhupada. I was speaking about his apparent, or when a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada about the spiritual master, can the spiritual master make mistakes? It's a very bold question to ask, especially seeing as most devotees were in a rather naive consciousness that the spiritual master, the perfect person, can make no mistakes of any kind whatsoever, because Brahm Pramad Vipralipsa Karana Partav Arsha Bigga Bake Nahi Doshe Shab, stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mistakes, illusion, imperfect senses, and the cheating propensity, these four defects do not appear in the words of veritable persons. But one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, can the spiritual master make mistakes? Because clearly, for instance, Srila Prabhupada's English grammar was far from perfect. He often quoted Sanskrit verses with his own version, just like, for instance, Janma karma cha me divyam evangyo veti tatvataha. But those who listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures will know that he always quoted Jo janati tatvataha, which is not exactly what's stated in Bhagavad Gita, and sometimes he would forget verses, and so on and so on. But devotees, they thought that not making mistakes means, I don't know what they thought, there's some idea that the spiritual master, or Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Yo mam eva samudho janati purushotamam sasarva vidbhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. He states that one who, without doubting or being bewildered, knows me to be the supreme person, or the person above all others. He knows everything, and he therefore worships me in all respects, unreservedly. So what does that mean? That means you're chanting your rounds one day, Hare Krishna, and all the anarthas have been going away gradually over the years, and all of a sudden there comes a moment where you know everything. You can speak every language that was ever spoken, you know everything, whatever Einstein, Newton, and everyone all discovered, you know it. It doesn't mean that. It means that you know what needs to be known, the essence of everything. You know the Tattva Gyan, Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan. One knows the essence of that, which is that I am an eternal servant of Krishna. He knows that very clearly. So, devotee asked Srila Prabhupada about his being, does the spiritual master make mistakes? And in reply to that, Srila Prabhupada is recorded, he stated, Acharya is not God omniscient. He is servant of God. His business is to preach bhakti cult. That is Acharya. That is the perfection. Perfection is here, how he is preaching the bhakti cult. That's all. So that is the answer to that one. So, Srila Prabhupada, he could read people's minds, he was good at dealing with people, he was a great cook, all these things and others we've heard about him. The essence is, of course, that he was a great pure devotee of Krishna, and even people who had very little idea of Krishna could appreciate that he was a real holy man. At the estate owned by John Lennon at Tittenhurst, when John and Yoko came to speak with him, and George also came, but in that conversation it's mostly John and Yoko speaking. George was already he was already convinced of the saintliness of Srila Prabhupada, but John and Yoko weren't, and they would ask questions, well, why you? Because there are so many people saying so many things, why should we accept your message? They specifically, from what I can see, they weren't very sincere. They're like many people who say, well, there are so many paths, and then they don't commit themselves to anything. But they said that they brought up the question that there are so many editions of there are so many people who are supposed to be gurus, so how can we know who's the real guru? They're sitting there in front of the real guru. But, yeah, it may be not everyone can recognize. So Srila Prabhupada said that all these gurus in India, they'll all quote Bhagavad Gita. They'll all accept Gita as authority. And in Gita, the message is very clear, Manmana bhavamad bhaktaha. Krishna says, always think of me and become my devotee. So the real guru, he is one who teaches you to always think of Krishna and be his devotee. The one who's always talking of Krishna. That's the real guru. Srila Prabhupada didn't say, I'm the real guru. I remember hearing one ISKCON initiated guru who's passed away now. And one devotee told me he was uninitiated, and they brought him to see this guru, and who said to him, you should take initiation from a genuine guru, a pure devotee. And then he asked, well, how can I know who's a genuine guru and pure devotee? And standing behind him, all his disciples were pointing at that guru. In other words, he felt that he was being pressured into taking initiation from that person. But Srila Prabhupada, when he was asked who is the real guru, he gave the criterion, that one who's always talking of Krishna. When they left, when John and Yoko left Prabhupada's presence, Yoko said to John, could you live as simply as that? Srila Prabhupada was quite content to live very simply, which is also a symptom of a holy man, that even if he has all facility to live very comfortably, he's not particularly inclined to do so. Hayagriva, quoting him a lot, as he is one of the main biographers of the early days of the Krishna conscious movement in the West, he wrote that, my parents visit New Vrindavan for a day. After talking with Prabhupada in his upstairs room, they are impressed. My mother says, you can tell immediately that he's a real holy man. All he talks about is Krishna. Miracles. There are different kinds of miracles. Famously, Srila Prabhupada, I quoted that the other day, and then I looked it up afterward. I read in one place that a newspaper reporter had asked Srila Prabhupada about what miracles can you perform, and Srila Prabhupada gestured to his disciples. It's also recorded that Srila Prabhupada did so at a major public lecture in Hyderabad, when someone citing Satya Sai Baba of miracle fame asked Srila Prabhupada if he could perform miracles, and Srila Prabhupada gestured to his disciples, Western disciples, on the stage and said, these are These are my miracles. So it may have been once or it may have been twice, but Srila Prabhupada said that. Generally we think of miracles, things like bringing the dead back to life, curing the incurable, turning water into wine. That's not one for devotees to do, even if you can do it. Walking on water, that's a famous miracle that Jesus did, although it's in India it's known to be one of the yoga siddhis, that if yogis do that kind of thing, it's not considered such a big thing. So there are other kinds of miracles. As Srila Prabhupada said, these are my miracles, pointing to his Western disciples. And in many cases, we find that devotees take to Krishna consciousness, and it's as if it's all being orchestrated from above. There's a whole series of things that happen, and many devotees report things just like that. Their wife may die, they lose all their money, and then they lose. So many things happen to them, and at the same time they keep on coincidentally coming in contact with the devotees. It's as if the whole thing's being choreographed from above, higher forces at work. So devotees, they often recognize the hand of Krishna in bringing them to Krishna consciousness, and the hand of Srila Prabhupada. That meeting one's guru, it's not some accident. We hear from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhaktilata Bij. Out of one among many, one rare soul among many, the practically infinite number within one universe, one who is very fortunate by the mercy of Guru and Krishna gets the seed of the creeper of devotional service. So it's not just an accident that it's all being arranged by Krishna, who's within the heart. And by the mercy of Krishna, the Guru can also manifest in the heart. In the beginning of Bhagavatam, that's stated in the beginning of the second chapter of the first canto about Shukadeva Goswami. Tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. I offer my obeisance to him, Shukadeva, who can enter the heart of everyone. So coming in contact with one's guru is nothing accidental. It's just not. It's not accidental. That's enough to say. The story of Hayagriva, and Kirtananda, Hayagriva came in contact with Srila Prabhupada first. They were interested mostly by reading books of Indian spirituality, which means some strange ideas. What few books were available at that time, and now there are so many books. But at that time, there were a few. Among those spiritual seekers in America, looking to the east, this Paramahamsa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, that was classic. It's still in print. It's still I never read it myself, but I think many of our devotees read it before coming to Krishna consciousness. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, various editions of Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads translated as well as possibly could be in English, because first of all, to understand the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, and then to translate it into English. And terms like Adhibhutam, Adhidaivam, it's not so easy to translate it into English, actually. That's another amazing feature of Srila Prabhupada, how he managed to make these concepts so available. Anyway, Hayagriva and Kirtananda, at that time known as Professor Howard, I'm not sure if he was later became a professor, Howard Wheeler and Keith Ham, they decided to go to India, to the place where it's all happening spiritually, to find out a guru. Oh, and of course there were gurus in the West also. I'm not sure, but the guru. There was the year of the guru. Time magazine. One year they put the front cover story was the year of the guru, because there were so many gurus coming over from India. But Hayagriva and Kirtananda, they went to India to look for a guru, and they went to Rishikesh, and they found a lot of sadhus among the clouds of ganja smoke. Ganja means marijuana, and they weren't very impressed. And they came back. They'd just come back when one day Hayagriva is walking along in the Lower East Side, and he sees a Swami. And he goes up to him and says, he didn't know what to say, so he said, "Are you from India?" You got to say something. And well, anyway, he found his guru in the streets of the Lower East Side of New York City. He didn't find in Rishikesh. And he didn't know about Vrindavan. At that time, Westerners hardly knew about Vrindavan. And still, Westerners on their spiritual quest, they mostly go to Rishikesh. I spent almost 6 weeks. That's the longest I stayed anywhere for quite a long time, earlier this year. So there are plenty of Westerners there. Anyway, I won't get into that. So he met Srila Prabhupada, and later on, he related this to Srila Prabhupada, that I went to India, I looked for a guru, I didn't find, then I came back, and Srila Prabhupada said, it was all Krishna's arrangement. Maybe if he had met Srila Prabhupada without going to India, he wouldn't have been ready. He'd have thought, oh, well, okay, seems okay, let me go to India and find someone who's better. They may think like that. There are cases like that. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was living in Mayapur before he had any big movement. He was a fairly young man, must have been in his 30s at that time. And one young man came to him, but then he thought, he's not spiritual enough. He's managing this yoga pit and keeping accounts and wondering where the money's coming from. I'm going to go and see his guru. So he went to stay with Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And he fell down eventually for his offensiveness. Anyway, the idea is that when the disciple is ready, then Krishna will send the guru, but Krishna will also assist in making you ready. 1969, late 1969, Srila Prabhupada was in London, he gave a lot of importance to preaching in London. He's trying to get the mission going there. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was, that time he wasn't a sannyasi. He'd been instrumental in organizing the Los Angeles Center, very successfully organizing the Sankirtan party and distribution of Back to Godhead magazines, and Sankirtan at that time meant Harinam Sankirtan, and distributing Back to Godhead magazines along with it, and collection. He was clearly an able organizer. So Srila Prabhupada called him to come, and the devotees from America who had already gone to England advised Tamal Krishna to come in civilian clothes and present himself as a tourist when coming through immigration, which he did, but the immigration officers seemed they were quite good at their job. which is to keep out all unwanted people like Hare Krishna devotees. They're not in that mood nowadays so much. But they suspected something about him, and they were suspicious, and they asked him, does he have any contact in London? Tamal Krishna gave a phone number, and the person who answered didn't know about all this, and gave away the game and said, yeah, Hare Krishna. He's coming, yeah, he's a religious preacher. So he came as a tourist. One should have a particular visa if one's a religious preacher, not coming as a tourist. So then the immigration officers, they checked through Tamal Krishna Maharaj's luggage, and what had happened previously, to avoid the draft to go into the Vietnam War, he'd found a friendly psychiatrist who gave him a letter saying that he's mentally unsound and not fit to be in the army. So the immigration officers found in his luggage a letter saying that he's mentally a highly maladjusted individual. So Tamal Krishna thought, I spend all this money to come here and they're just going to put me on the plane to go back. I'm supposed to come and meet Prabhupada. So he started praying to Prabhupada, and then he was taken to meet a doctor who was supposed to personally evaluate him. And the doctor was actually quite interested in what he said. They had a long discussion, and then the doctor gave him a clean chit, okay, and then the immigration officers let him in. Then when Tamal Krishna Prabhu, I guess at that time, later said this to the devotees, they were surprised at how perceptive the immigration officials were, and they took it that it was Krishna's test. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj quoted that he realized that whatever was taking place was happening only by Srila Prabhupada's causeless mercy. That's how we would, if we were in such a situation, we would think like that, wouldn't we? But what are the implications of that? What does that mean? That means that Srila Prabhupada was aware of everything that was going on and he was orchestrating it all. He was capable of influencing the thoughts of the immigration officers. How is that possible? Well, tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. It's possible by Krishna's mercy. Krishna is the super soul in everyone's heart, and he influences people in various ways to do things and say things, and devotees can experience Krishna's hand, and they take that it's Prabhupada's hand, because Prabhupada wanted this, then Krishna, he acted in such a way, because Prabhupada, Shri Shri Jagat Guru, Jagate Madhe Uru. Srila Prabhupada wrote about his own guru that he's a great guru and he's very powerful, and has this strong desire that the Krishna conscious movement be spread in the Western countries, and therefore it will be. So Prabhupada's mercy, it can work in mysterious ways. I'll speak more about that tomorrow, Krishna willing. Hare Krishna.